it's episode 120 of the Masterclass. And I'm Cam. That voice you just heard belongs to my friend Dave.
Yes.
What's up?
Well, kind of at the end of the chaos of summer.
It is almost over, isn't it?
Kind of the things that it seems like everybody scatters for.
Like cockroaches to a light.
Is beginning to come to an end, and people that I haven't seen in a while, including this podcast and Cam, have kind of
We've resurfaced, yes.
So
I was hibernating all summer because, I don't know if you can tell based on the color of my skin, I hid as much as possible. I'm never whiter than I am in the summertime, but it's because my freckles, they steal all of the tan. My freckles get dark and it makes the rest of my skin just look even more pasty than it already is. That and the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
Yeah. Try to get out a little bit.
Did you guys go on the boat at all?
We did. Yep.
Good.
Yeah. Actually quite a bit. So
good. Boating is wonderful. If you can, if you live in a place where you can enjoy it and you have the means, or more importantly, a friend has the means, yachting is fun. Boating, tubing. My grandpa had a sailboat growing up, or while I was growing up, and it was my weekly duty to clean it. But that also meant that I got lunch at the yacht club and I got to sail with him very, very regularly. And it was my goal. I don't know if I've ever told you this. What I wanted to do the summer after I graduated high school, not work and make money to go to college, was to take my grandpa's boat. Now, remember, I grew up in Detroit, right on the water. And unlike here in Kansas, the water in Michigan can get you to the ocean. So Lake St. Clair is essentially, it's north of the Detroit River and south of Lake Huron. It's essentially the Detroit River found a big plain and just got real bloated and became a lake. But you can take Lake St. Clair down the Detroit River to Lake Erie, and then take Lake Erie to the St. Lawrence Seaway and take that all the way to the Atlantic. So you go all the way through eastern Ontario and then all the way through Quebec. And you come out in the Atlantic Ocean just north of Maine. So it was my goal to take my grandfather's 48 or 42 foot sailboat that was built for the Mediterranean. So it's seaworthy. From the yacht club in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, through all of that, down the entire East Coast, and in like there's a little intercoastal seaway that's in between the mainland and a lot of the islands. And then take that all the way down to the Bahamas and then come all the way back.
Wow.
That's what I wanted to do with the summer, which is one, amazing, and two, the most like unrealistic and selfish and totally ludicrous idea. I told my grandpa that and he looked at me, he goes, "Are you effing kidding me? Why am I going to hand you my multi-$100,000 sailboat for you who's never sailed on the ocean? Yes, you're an accomplished small boat sailor. I sailed all 4 years in high school, but those boats were 13 feet long and, did not cost as much as my parents' house. Why would I ever give you this boat to go solo, no less?
Yeah. How
are you going to feed yourself? Who's going to steer the boat when you got to go take a dump? Like all of these things that I hadn't, the grandness of the adventure captivated me, and obviously it never happened. And, since then my grandpa has passed away and the sailboat has been sold to someone who I will hold a grudge against, just because I was not in a position to own, house, maintain, or actually use a sailboat. So they're really expensive. Anyways.
Yes. So your wording reminds me of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he says, "It is so choice. If you have the means, I highly recommend picking one up."
Well, and much like Ferris Bueller, my name is Cameron, and I do love me the Red Wings.
Let my people go.
Except my dad's not my dad doesn't have a Porsche in a glass garage in the woods. My dad loved his minivan more than anything.
You know,
It's
I never
true.
made the Red Wings connection.
Seriously?
I'm truly, I'm
David,
embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by
I'm
the
embarrassed
fact that
for you.
I never made the whole
He wears
Cameron.
it the whole
I know.
movie.
I know.
Oh man. I don't know if we can recover from this.
Yes. Yeah. Might as well
Oh,
just
well.
call it right now.
Yeah, that's it.
We're done.
Show's
That's
over.
the end. No more masterclass.
We're just gonna close the doors and maybe someone will find us later on.
So how old were you when that movie came out?
Oh gosh.
Like you weren't named after
No, my Cameron is my mom's maiden.
1986.
I was born in 86,
Okay.
but Cameron is my mom's maiden name.
Oh, that's
So the
okay.
grandpa whose boat that I wanted to abscond with down the Atlantic coast, his name was Dougal Cameron from
Gotcha.
Glasgow, Scotland. Moved over here in the 50s.
Wow.
Was an engineer at Chrysler.
Oh, that's cool.
He has the patent for the first transmission in a minivan ever. That's his work. So you enjoy that, you 1988 Chrysler Voyager or whatever the heck it was. It's obviously no longer in use, but it was on his wall in the living room. It's pretty cool.
Well, that was Lee Iacocca.
Mm-hmm.
And he had.
Yeah, he's got a few pictures with him and Lee.
So Lee Iacocca had the pony car, which was the Mustang,
Uh-huh.
Camaro. He did the minivan.
That changed a lot of lives, that minivan.
And then I think then Chrysler acquired Jeep. I think you
Mhm.
could argue he's the forefather of the SUV as we know SUVs today. Not that there weren't other.
My grandpa had a Grand Cherokee when I was a kid, and he had the car phone in it, and I thought it
Oh.
was the coolest thing ever.
That's awesome.
They used to so my grandpa would get new cars like every 2 or 3 years because through Chrysler, he had like a killer lease program. Like I would never recommend anyone ever lease a car. I think it's a terrible financial decision. But the deal that they were getting in the 90s when things were just, this was before they all went bankrupt or almost. Things were just, they were handing money away. He would get a new car every 2 or 3 years, and it would be top of the line leather seats because they got such a good employee deal on it. My grandma and my grandpa would invite me over when they got the new car, and they would just sit me in there and they go, okay, figure out all the electronics. And I would sit in there as like a 10-year-old, and I would figure out what all the buttons did, what, how to set up the automatic garage door opener that was built into the visor, the CD changer in the back trunk, like that sort of crap.
Yes.
I think they knew how to do all of it. I just think they wanted to make me feel smart and special. I did not expect to talk about this. This is
I did not either.
very nostalgic for me. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to the original Chrysler minivan.
Well, it was.
So
I
you can
remember
see
there was
some
a
of my
Dodge
grandpa's-
Caravan. There was a Plymouth Voyager.
Plymouth Voyager, yeah. The
And then
Chrysler Town and Country.
There was a Town and
which
Country is what I would have
We had
guessed.
a Plymouth, our first minivan. I remember we had a Dodge Omni when I was a kid. My
Wow.
parents, being the lovely, wonderful human beings they were, left me in it alone one time in the driveway. I think my dad, I legit think my dad just forgot like a wallet or something in the house and ran in. And I somehow managed to unlodge it from park and rolled down the driveway, across the street, and up the neighbor's driveway. And by the grace of God alone, there was no cross
There was
traffic.
no.
But I'm also the same kid that stuck his finger on the bright orange cigarette lighter twice to figure out that bright orange means hot. Don't do that.
Mm.
So it could have been totally my fault. But yeah, I'll have a link in the show notes to the original Chrysler minivan, and because that'll be fun. But yeah, I remember the Plymouth Voyager. We had a purple Plymouth Voyager, and none of the windows were tinted, which is really weird in a minivan. If you ever see a minivan that doesn't have the back windows aren't tinted,
Mhm.
it's like a couch on wheels because you can see everything, and it's so unusual. And then later on, we got a Chrysler Town and Country. And my dad, he would rather drive a minivan than any other vehicle on the planet, which I don't understand.
I don't know that I would drive one other
It would
than
be his
any
first
other.
choice.
It would not be my first choice, but I will just tell you this, that minivans make so much sense. I mean, it's
so
like
expensive.
you truly are just like, it is amazing the amount of room that you have in a minivan.
Well, now with like the stow and go seating and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we got rid of ours a couple of years ago thinking that our oldest daughter was in college. We didn't need the minivan anymore.
That's when you need it, man.
And then it was like, we literally was like, oh my gosh. In fact, just this past weekend, we went and picked up a couch and end tables and put them in the back of a minivan. You take the seats out and it is unreal. I got a washer and a dryer in a.
I fit my entire dorm room in the back of a minivan. Now, don't get me wrong. That thing was loaded for war. Like if anyone rear-ended us, they were going to lose. But yeah, like couch, bunk bed, clothes, guitar amps, like the whole 9 yards.
It would not be my first choice, but I would have a hard time. The practicality of a minivan just far exceeds just about anything. So
I think if my dad still could like justify the cost to my mother, he would still have one. Now, granted, he has a Honda Element, which is essentially a square minivan because the back seats fold up into the windows on the sides. Gosh. So it essentially becomes 2 front seats and a giant. Yeah, it's a minivan, just cube shape. So, hey, remember before the show when we were talking about that podcast we want to record where we just talk about random stuff? This is the pilot episode. We're now going to return to the masterclass, but thanks for hanging in there, ladies and gentlemen. That show may or may not be coming available in the future. We'll see. We need a name for it too. So if you're still listening and haven't either deleted this episode or skipped ahead to the actual conversation, we need a name for the show where me and Dave just talk about whatever the heck comes to the front of our brains, because we just had a lot of fun. I don't know if you did, but we're going to give it a shot at some point in the future because there's so much stupidness and silliness that happens before we actually try and talk serious about, Jesus, that we thought, we should give that a thought. And unbeknownst to both of us, we just gave it a trial run without even really planning on it. So if you have a show name for that,
yes, let us know.
Let us know on Twitter. Dave is at David J. Hogue. I'm at Cam Brennan. You can email us hello@supermegacorp.net and put in the subject line, best show title ever. And I will read it immediately. And we'll go from there.
Yes.
So I've given us a professional transition, David. Let us not waste it.
All right.
What are we talking about today?
So we're looking at Romans 4 and verse 13. And really, we're going to go all the way through to the end of Romans 4, because this is really one kind of continual thought. Don't know that we'll dissect it maybe a whole lot, maybe a broader discussion, but yeah, that's where we're at. We're at the second half of Romans 4, and we'll probably finish that today. So if you would like, I can read that.
Bring it.
All right. So verse 13, for the promise to Abraham and his offspring that he would be heir of the world did not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. For it is the adherents of the law who are to be the heirs. Faith is null and the promise is void, for the law brings wrath, but where there is no law, there is no transgression. That is why it depends on faith in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all his offspring, not only to the adherent of the law, but also to the one who shares the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I have made you the father of many nations, in the presence of God in whom he believed, who gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that do not exist. In hope that he believed against hope that he should become the father of many nations, as he had been told, so shall your offspring be. He did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb. No unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God, but he grew strong in his faith as he gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. That is why his faith was counted to him as righteousness. But the words, it was counted to him, were not written for his sake alone, but for ours also. It will be counted to us who believe in him, who raised from the dead Jesus our Lord, who was delivered up for our trespasses and raised for our justification.
All right, thank you, sir.
Felt like I should have taken a deeper breath at the beginning of that.
Pulled the Ace Ventura. Loser.
And the title of that is The Promise Realized Through Faith, which, I don't know. As I scrolled back, it kind of stuck out to me.
All right. Now, where to begin?
Mm-hmm.
So, verse 14 is, I think, 13 and 14 are pretty important to understand, leading out of what we talked about last time and what that was all about and leading into where we're going. So what do you think it means? Or in verse 14, it says, for if it is the adherents of the law who are to be the heirs, faith is null and the promise is void. Like he makes a very distinct claim there. If this is true, then these are the results. And if these are the results, then why is it a big deal that Abraham's righteousness was credited to him as faith, or by faith?
So then my initial thought is that there's this element of God has presented the law. The law certainly serves a purpose. Namely, it points out to us what our sins are. And there's this, with Abraham in his story, this dependence on God. And when you look at the world religions, every other religion other than Christianity, and I guess I would include Judaism in that, there's this idea of I can do something to get to God. I can do something to earn heaven. I can do something to earn salvation. And one of the things that's coming to my mind right now is the 5 pillars of Islam. I mean, these are very specific things that if I do this, I do this, I do this, then I will get to go to heaven. And so, if I have the giving of alms and I make the voyage to Mecca, and if I do all the things that I'm supposed to do, I can earn my salvation. And so, long before the law, and long before Jesus coming and fulfilling the law, we got this guy Abraham, who faith is the key kind of underlying word when it talks about him and his relationship with God. And I think ultimately what God is saying here is there's this, Abraham by faith believes God. Abraham is trusting on God. He is dependent on God. And Abraham knows that within his own power, his own ability, I mean, just even being able to have a kid at advanced life stage is really impossible for him to do. And so he has to have faith in God to make this happen. And so for me, this is kind of the beginning, the underlying theme of who God really is and how he interacts with history in terms of believing God and taking him at his word and trusting in him and being dependent on him is essential to a relationship with him. And, if the law could do what the law was supposed to do, then faith wouldn't be necessary.
Can I rephrase that?
Sure. I wish you would.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I hear that, what I think it should be is if the law could accomplish what we wanted it to accomplish. Like, I don't think God set the law out to be salvation, right? It says the law was
no.
So, but what Judaism was at the time, the law was salvation, right? And that's why Jesus had to come and clear the temple out, because they had taken it so far in the direction of you must do this, and this to be right before God. And that is the only way that you can be right before God. Whereas the entire point, as far as I understand it, of the law was to prove that you cannot get there. The law was to convict, and that was it. Right? Mm-hmm.
Well, the law was to convict, but I don't know. I think there's God's perspective and there's man's perspective.
Well, and that's what I was trying to get at.
And I think from man's perspective, it's like, well, if I meet all the elements of law,
then I'm there. And God's like, no, you don't get it. You can't meet all the requirements. Yeah. And so that's what I was getting at, is that God implemented the law for one reason and man saw it for a different. And so that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
anyways.
Because verse 15 says, for the law brings wrath.
Mm-hmm.
but where there is no law, there is no transgression. And so God,
there's so much we can talk about there.
right. So,
okay.
So even in that verse right there, it's saying the whole purpose of law is to show what you've done wrong.
Yes, that was what I was trying to say.
And not just show what you've done wrong, but for there to be consequences
for the wrong that has been committed.
For what you have done.
And that's where Jesus shows up.
Right. Because again, Jesus says, I came to fulfill the law, because without the law, I think Paul talks about this somewhere. Without the law, I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't know what my transgressions are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need the law to show me what my transgressions are.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I can't do it. So yeah, it's so, man.
We're not going to get all the way through.
We're not going to get all through this. No. And even in this, my mind is completely blown because I have to confess, I've never thought about this with much. Well, I haven't thought about it at all. The fact that this whole conversation with Abraham is well before the law even comes into place. The law doesn't exist. It's Noah, it's Abraham, it's Adam, it's this group of people that exist since creation that for one reason or another choose to believe in a God and try to whatever they try to do.
And this is what I wrote down verbatim while you were reading that was, why did Abraham have faith? Nothing came before him like Christianity. How did he know? And how crazy is this? Given their physical situation, that he was credited with having faith in something that there was no institution, there was no history, there was no scripture. It was just a guy who, for some reason, decided God exists. I can talk with him and have a relationship with him. Like, this sounds like absolute crazy talk to people nowadays.
Yeah, because even with the Genesis, I mean, and this was not sure how the show will be edited, but as we launched into this, one of the things I started to do was look at Genesis 15. And if you take the Bible as a whole, I honestly couldn't tell you how many verses there are, but I'm guessing there's thousands of verses.
In the Bible?
If not tens of thousands. And we're literally talking 15 chapters in.
Yeah, a couple hundred verses. Where it talks about God's covenant with Abram. He hasn't even had his name changed. So, I mean, like early on in the whole Bible story is exactly what you're talking about. This idea of him being in relationship with God. And then even in that, for me, there's this element of that was kind of screwed up already in terms of the Garden of Eden and God saying what I had designed and had intended had already fallen apart and they'd gotten kicked. Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And so yet he still was in relationship with God. He still had that interaction with him and faith with him. So, yeah. So just that timeline is very much yeah. And that's what really hit me about it is because, like, I mean, Abraham is such a well-known figure in the Bible. And when you really kind of put what was available to him as far as tradition, knowledge, scripture, other people that believed the same thing as him into perspective, you begin to realize, like, there's a reason God picked him. He was not normal.
Mm-hmm.
There could easily have been other people that felt the same way as him. For whatever reason, God chose Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like God waited until now when there are literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of Christians on the planet to go, okay, now I'm going to choose someone to make, like, that would obviously be, inconsistent, because how can you be the father of a family if, like, you're like family member 7 billion.2, or that's not even a number. I can't 7 billion.2. Oh man.
A Googleplex.
Yeah, there we go. Everything that anything that I said earlier just went out the window. But I just have personally never thought of Abraham that way before. At the practical ludicrousy of what he believed, based on what,
Mm-hmm.
and it's, as far as I can surmise, and this is a total guess, it's based on two things: the physical world and his personal experience. And for a large portion of human existence, those two things mattered.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, sure.
If you read the Psalms, I mean, if you look at a lot of like the Native Americans, and now I'm starting to get out of my depth here, but a lot of what I have learned or read about them was their relationship with Mother Earth and deity is based on the physical universe and being in tune with that, and then personal experience. And nowadays that doesn't really matter as much because they're not reliable, they're not consistent, they're not, scientific or what have you. But to me, there's something there. It has become increasingly accepted that the physical is unreliable, that the physical universe was an accident, that life was an accident, that order is an accident, which is of all of those things, order being an accident is the most ludicrous to me. That's an absolute oxymoron.
Yeah, because you don't see that.
No,
you don't see.
Now things tend toward entropy, which is chaos, right?
It falls apart. Yeah,
things fall apart, but that is, from the Christian mindset, a symptom of sin, of things being broken, of not being how they were intended to be. But for there to be order at all, which there is everywhere you look, order cannot come from chaos. Order can descend into chaos, but order cannot come from it.
Yeah. If you study physics and you look at the law of physics, there is no law of physics that says order comes from chaos. It is quite the opposite.
Yeah. Order can quickly descend into it, given a few variables, but it's, yeah. So relying on what's the phrase I want to use here? Relying on an open view of the physical universe, an honest assessment of what is there and what is not, questioning why it is the way it is, and coupling that with personal experience. Abraham, as far as I can tell, and I could be missing the boat here. So please, if I'm missing something, if I'm wrong, let me know. But it seems to me that is how he came to this decision, that God exists, and also God is interested in me, that's an even huger, again, with the not English, is an even larger leap, right? Because what precedent does he have for that, other than knowing the story of Adam and Eve, which would have been passed down, as a story. But I don't know, man, it's crazy.
So the only thing I can come up with is in Genesis 12, it says, the Lord said to Abram, which is Abraham's name before God changes it. And that is our very first introduction.
So then we have three things: physical universe, personal experience, and God actually intervening.
Yeah.
Which would be the most convincing.
Sure.
To be fair.
But again, why did God intervene with him? Because, it's very quickly that, verse 4, Abram went as the Lord told him, and Lot went. Abram was 75 years old. So clearly he's lived quite a life, and they're going to the land of Canaan. And when they came to the land of Canaan, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built an altar to the Lord. who had appeared to him. So, if God appears to me, hopefully I'm somebody that builds an altar versus writing it off as some hallucination.
Shouldn't have had those mushrooms.
Exactly.
I had those on the do not eat list.
But the first thing that he does is they go into Egypt. And he lies about who his wife is. I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you. So here's a guy in relationship with God, and the first thing he does is tell his wife, hey, lie about who you are.
Well, you know what that says? He knows dudes. And also, Sarah in her 70s is a total babe, apparently. I mean,
maybe late 60s. Maybe she's a little bit younger.
But still, David,
exactly.
No Botox, no makeup. Come on.
And
well,
so
maybe makeup, but I mean, he knows dudes.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying, like.
And so what does Pharaoh do? Pharaoh takes her as his wife. And then the Lord afflicts Pharaoh with plagues because of her. And then Pharaoh calls Abram and says, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife?
Like, seriously, bro? Yeah. Yeah.
So
he's lucky he didn't get them all killed.
He's lucky he didn't get them all killed. And I'm not, maybe I am. I don't want my intent to be to justify anything that I've ever done in my faith as being okay. And I should never compare myself to others. My standard is higher than that. Here is a guy that God is giving all kinds of credit to for being a man of faith, and he manipulates the situation to benefit him because he doesn't trust God. And it's not the only time he does it.
We haven't even gotten to the worst part yet, which Paul just glosses over.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Oh, man. And then verse 15, for the law brings wrath, but where there is no law, there is no transgression. And that to me is something that I think the church in America needs to understand in so many ways. And so I'm going to turn the tables here big time, I think, just because the second I heard this, the first thing that came to my mind was homosexual marriage in America.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not Christians, why would we hold them to Christian standards?
Well, yeah.
Like, I'm not a vegetarian and you are, and you judge me based on vegetarian standards for eating meat. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not restricted by the things that you are.
Mm-hmm.
I like meat. It's yummy. I have it at every meal. And what I don't understand is why Christians in general, and again, my statement on general statements, Dave, what is wrong with my brain tonight?
You're fine.
I understand the weakness of general statements. So if this general statement doesn't apply to you, I don't intend it to. Oh man, I'm all flustered now. Like, why is it that Christians are so eager to judge non-Christians by Christian standards? It makes quite literally zero sense. And so for a verse like this to say, where there is no law, there is no transgression, duh. But it is so easy for us, and I'm going to throw myself in the boat here, to judge other people that do not believe the same things we believe by our own beliefs, and therefore make ourselves look and or feel better in judgment on those people. And it's ludicrous. And this is not just for the issue of homosexuality or what it's for anything that you feel like your Christianity makes you better than someone for, when they are not living or held to the same standards that we are because they are not believers. It doesn't mean that the actions are necessarily correct, but if there's no law or in our, circumstance, grace and mercy to hold them to something, why on earth would we expect there to be?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I making any sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, and I think 1 Corinthians 5:12,
Yes.
maybe even verse 13,
Yes.
supports what you're saying. For what have I to do with judging outsiders?
Mm-hmm.
Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. And then in quotes, it says, purge the evil person from among you. And so, and I think even in that, why is there such this obsession of, if somebody is in a homosexual lifestyle and should they come to know Christ, why is the first thing we feel like we have to do is to convince them that they have to put that away?
Because that's the worst sin, David.
So, and
oh man, I have so much on this. Continue.
So the thing that for me personally is when I was young and I was a new Christian, and I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but it is true because it's where I was. There were times where I was like, I didn't think I sinned. I literally was just like, oh, I don't sin. I don't do this. I don't do
Good
that.
for you.
And the farther along I go in my Christian journey and the deeper I get in my faith I feel like I need more grace than when I was and again, it's this, I just realize I am a sinner.
Well, it's not these come individuals to a better understanding of who God is and who you are, and
how depraved I really am.
The difference between those two. I do not think you're alone in the feeling of when you are to use a Christianese term, a young Christian,
mm-hmm.
or just someone new to the faith,
yeah.
To go, Jesus is great, God is great. I think I'm kind of great too. Once you get past whatever the initial impulse is to go, oh my gosh, I am a sinner, I need God. Everyone has to come to the point where they feel like they need to be saved. Otherwise, no one would ever become a Christian. But then after a while, you get into that oh man, I go to church, I read my Bible, man, I sing those worship songs with some gusto. I might even play in the band. I go to small group. You kind of get that self-inflated. And it might be, I would love to talk to some folks that came to faith later in their life and had already kind of been humbled by the world.
Yeah.
I think our situation is much more common in folks like us that came to faith early
mm-hmm.
and had that young hubris of just being a young person who, the world is my oyster. I'm invincible. God is good, but I'm kind of good too. I think that's pretty normal. At least as I said there in that scenario, but it again, that the quote from Tim Keller that I think I bring up every 5 or 6 episodes, and again, I'm going to paraphrase because I need to memorize this quote along the lines of, you'll never, how does he say it? God's grace is more than we could ever imagine. And our depravity is greater than we would ever care to admit. So the more we come to know God, the more that we come to be with him in relationship, the difference between us becomes more and more and more and more apparent. And the farther away we get from the, you're great, I'm great, and we get to the, holy cow, I've done these things,
mm-hmm.
yet you still love me. Holy cow, I've thought these things, you sent your son to die for me. Holy cow, I have, this, that, and the other thing, and yet you still want me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the beauty of God and the gospel and his creation, is that it does not matter. The deeper you go, the more he is there.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, it's just, you got me all distracted, Dave, in a good way. I guess, man, I really had this whole thing I wanted to talk about, and now I can't remember it because I'm all distracted by, like, God being graceful and merciful and, taking care of his people.
Mm-hmm.
What a jerk.
Okay, so I'm reminded of when Jesus calls Peter to come follow him in specifically in Luke 5. Jesus tells them to put their nets out again, and Simon, who Jesus changes to Peter, says, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And so they let down the nets, and there's this large catch of fish, so large that they have to kind of call the other boat over, and they fill up both boats with the catch they've had. And in Luke 5:8, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he knew all who were with him were astonished at the catch and the fish they had taken. And so, from a worldly standpoint, Peter's saying that, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." So many of us, if we were Jesus, which is absurd, but if we were Jesus, there'd be an element of, okay, yeah, you're right. I'll move on to the next guy. But for Peter, "Depart from me, O Lord, I am a sinful man." That was a moment where Jesus actually says, "Nope, you're the guy I want. And not only are you the guy I want, but you are going to be in the inner circle of the guys that I want, and you are going to be one of my best friends. And hey, a few years from now, I'm going to call you the rock that I'm building the church upon."
He's going to star in so many action movies.
And one, it's difficult for me to acknowledge that I'm that sinful. And so that's probably one of the places I need to start from is "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." And then even in that, allow him to forgive me and then work in my life and allow me to come alongside him. And as Christians, kind of back to our point in our discussion, is we kind of have this idea of, oh, we got to get rid of all the sin first. We gotta get cleaned up so we can get into the shower to get clean. We gotta, don't want to get the shower dirty before I get in there. I gotta wash myself, and then I can get in the shower and take my actual
ritualistic
shower.
Purification. Yeah.
That is so how we treat Christianity. And I truly, it's one of those things where my experience has been when somebody who lives in a homosexual lifestyle, and I'm not saying I've experienced this broadly or on many occasions, but I have been at least a distant observer of somebody who has come to the church from the homosexual lifestyle. It seems to me that there's this instant, we need to fix you and we need to get rid of the homosexuality.
Whereas if he was just a stereotypical heterosexual guy.
Yeah. Well, Peter.
Right. We wouldn't have that, like, oh, we need to solve you of whatever ails you. It would just be like, oh, welcome to the church. Hey, come to the church picnic. You want to join a small group? Hey, do you play guitar? We could use a guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
But if you come in with the label of homosexual, all of a sudden, yeah, we need to save you from that sin immediately before you can even serve, or you can even like take the church 101, like, hey, this is what it means to be a Christian class. Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying now. Okay.
So now I'm not saying that, and this is where I may sound like a hypocrite or whatever, but because we all have this sort of ingrained sin in our life, rooted sin in our life that we constantly battle. I do believe that we all have those things that while we are forgiven of them by him, it's never completely removed from us. I think we all have that thing, that sin in our life that will be
different for each person.
And it is different for each person. and we've had this conversation before of, I think I have to be honest to that person and say, I don't think you can live in this lifestyle.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not going to tell that person to leave that lifestyle, but I do think there's an element of God has to convict you and you have to do what God is telling you to do. But if you ask me, I'm going to give you my genuine, and maybe even in that, it depends on how close our relationship is as to how.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna walk up to a stranger and be like,
No.
Listen, here's how you need to live your life.
Yeah.
But
That's
given
true
your
of
position,
any sin.
But given your position as an elder at your church,
Mhm.
if there is not even a young man, just a man that you are familiar with, that you have seen, at the church,
Mhm.
participating, being an active member of that community, who is still actively either, in a monogamous, loving, or homosexual relationship, or just like whatever other circumstances there may be, and is convinced that he can both be a Bible believing, God fearing, going to be with Jesus Christian, and also engaging in a homosexual relationship. And you have a relationship with this guy, as far as like
Mhm.
that's a conversation you need to have.
Yes.
And you would feel comfortable, assuming he's not a stranger. Like, would you feel it was your duty
I would not
as a
feel
church?
comfortable. No.
But would
I
you
feel, and I even hate using this word, but I do believe it's, would I feel righteous in my conversation? Yes. And not do I feel righteous, but in God's righteousness, do I feel it's appropriate?
Yeah. Well, and we've said this on the show multiple times before. Like, it would be so much easier if it was totally okay.
I agree.
It would just solve so many problems.
Yep.
Man, how did we wind up here on this episode? This is like 100% my fault. That verse 15 just triggered me, man.
Yeah. Well,
Just triggered me.
and again, I think it's that element of, and this was something that I just, this conversation to me, I can genuinely say this conversation happens regularly for me
Mm-hmm.
in terms of we are all sinners and we are all in need of grace and we are all in need of forgiveness, and that we are sinful. That's who we are and that's where we live, versus these are my individual sins. And I feel like I need to get rid of all these individual sin. Like, I just need to get rid of this and I'll be right with God. And if I just get rid of this, I'll be right with God. And we've talked about Dallas Willard and the gospel of sin management.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we're talking about here. Because
Mhm.
again, it's not that we don't strive for these things, but and even as I say this, it almost sounds a little bit discouraging, because you conquer this sin and you get this off the table, there's going to be a new one to take on.
Well, and I guess the hypocrisy I see with the homosexuality thing in the church is like, we would never allow an openly homosexual man or woman to be a pastor of a church and teach the Bible. But our pastor drinks too much. Our pastor looks at porn. Our pastor lies on his taxes.
Or how about just the fact that our pastor
is a freaking sinner? Like, that's what I mean. That's where I'm trying to get to. Is like, it does not matter. Like, we try and whitewash it, as Jesus says, whitewash the tombs on the outside to make them look pretty. Like, it does not matter what person you put in that pulpit. Outside of Jesus, anyone who teaches is a sinner. They are actively sinning to some degree or another. And for whatever reason, like, I get it. I agree that homosexuality is a sin. But guess what? It's not any worse than any other ones.
No.
And if you're banging someone that isn't your wife, guess what? You fit in. Like, if you divorce and you get remarried, you commit adultery. Like I don't understand. I don't understand why it's become this like, oh, well, you're a worse kind of sinner. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, and divorce is one of those ones that
we just don't even worry about anymore.
No.
And it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And like, there's 1.5 million reasons why couples get divorced. But as we said earlier, this is what I was going to say earlier. When we talk about crap, I just forgot. No, I'm just kidding. I kind of did. I'm just telling. Hold on. Okay. I kind of forgot, but I'm back. I got it now. Church discipline. We talked earlier about we judge inside the church and not outside.
Mm-hmm.
What do we see the church do 95% of the time? Judge everyone outside of the church and not inside of the church. How often have you had church discipline discussions? Either on the elder board, in a small group? How often do you see the church discipline members of the church versus how often you see Christians judging people that do not adhere to the same beliefs?
So one of the things I will say is I feel like in terms of the discussions that we have, we're actually pretty good at that.
Okay.
We're pretty good at saying this is somebody we need to hold accountable,
Mhm.
and this is why. Now, in the broader scope of me and my faith and the conversations that I have, that's a small percentage.
Yeah. Well,
And that's the only thing I can speak to is me and but when it comes to church business, there is an element of, I don't feel like we do a lot of that, but in my personal and my friendships, yeah, I'm guilty of.
well, in
there
my
being a different
experience when I worked as a youth pastor was that church discipline was marginal at best. It was not something that our church engaged in. But I also don't feel like our church is out there, on the picketing and stuff. But even growing up when I wasn't working for the church, like the concept, I didn't understand the concept of church discipline until I was reading books on the church as an adult. It was never something that I was aware of. Now, it could have been because I was a kid and I was protected from, a lot of that stuff. But like the whole reason the church I went to growing up exploded was because there was none, not for the staff, not for the people at the church. And it just exploded and it was nasty and disgusting. And it was just the worst of the worst when it comes to church stuff. And so I'm a little touchy here, to the point where I think like we need to get back to that. But it's so countercultural now for the church to be telling you what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
And I'm kind of okay with that. Like there's been this saying going on in my head. Like if I were ever to work at a church again, which I want to do, and if I were ever to lead a church again, which I think later on in life would be something that I would like to do once I'm not ready. I'm not there. Is I want everyone to be welcome at my church.
Absolutely.
But I don't want anyone to be comfortable.
Interesting. Yeah.
Probably not a perfect saying, but I think that if everyone is welcome and no one feels completely comfortable, then it means that everybody is paying attention and everybody is engaging and everybody is trying to figure out what God is wanting them to change in their life.
Right.
Because the second you become comfortable is the second Satan goes, let's bring in the recliner. I'm good. And that's when complacency kicks in. And that's when you get all sorts of BS you don't need in your life.
Well, and that's, so one of the ones that I feel like doesn't get addressed enough is materialism. And
Dave, we don't talk about it. We live in the suburbs.
Yeah,
come on,
exactly. Man. And I'm probably guilty of that. And
dude, we have in-ear monitors. Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
And then, so the materialism is the one thing. And then, it seems like it's few and far between that a church leader is kind of scrutinized, evaluated, really looked at who they are for their materialism. But boy, if there's a hint of any kind of sexual wrong then that just absolutely. And I'm thinking a very specific of what, and I'll just mention this because it's in the public deal, is what Bill Hybels has been dealing with at Willow Creek in Chicago. In that, and to be honest with you, as somebody who has worked in the church and is now outside the church and is now in a very dark career, the things that they are saying that he did, I want to laugh. Like I'm literally like, really? That's the best you got on this guy? Because I tell you what, even if he did do the things that you're saying he did, just come on. Now, God's standard is different than our standard.
Yeah, and I almost just said something I shouldn't. So
God's standard is different than our standard. But as an outsider, and I will admit that I'm an outsider when it comes to Willow Creek, I have no firsthand knowledge of any of these people, but I have more concerns about how money is spent
at a church like that,
as an outsider looking in, than anything that I have heard that Bill Hybel has done in terms of quote unquote hugs that lasted too long. Again, in my job, if I brought up an accusation of a hug that lasted too long, I would be laughed out of the room and told to go find something better to focus on. Again, God's standard is different than our standard, but I know I'm speaking out of turn, and I apologize for that, but well, and I shouldn't even follow it with I apologize for speaking out of turn. All sin is equal, and we need to quit raising sexual sin to a level higher than some other things. And if we really want to evaluate ourselves at the church, I think we need to look at all of it.
Yeah. So I think a positive way to not to spin it, but to say that statement is sexual sin is heightened. We need to raise other sin to that level, because what we don't want to do is downplay the trauma. And I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying, if we can be as clear as day here, what we are saying is that yes, sexual sin is very important, but so is all the other bull crap. And all that other bull crap has been lessened and numbed to the point that we have people committing fraud and theft and tax evasion. And we're like, yeah, it's bad, but it's not as bad. Yes, it is as bad as that. And the people that are affected by the sexual sin deserve all of the, the mercy and grace and, that. But we need to not lessen the other crap. All sin is equal, and that does not make the sexual stuff less bad. It makes the other stuff just as bad. Because when you start pulling favorites, man, and it's cultural, in 100 years, it might be the financial stuff that's bad. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to be around, so it's not going to bother me, but
yes.
Oh, well, man, we got through 3 whole verses.
So yeah, what I thought was going to be a simple discussion, and we'd move to the end. So
yeah, we will carry on in verse 16 next time, I guess.
Yeah.
Remember when we weren't going to go through Romans verse by verse?
Yeah. Well, and even in that, just to kind of close here, verse 16 says that is why it depends on faith. Again, there's this element of faith and just trusting in God and not ourselves, in order that the promise may rest on grace. Grace. Wow. It is about grace, because even as we look at Abraham and the lies that he told, lying is another one. We seem to excuse what, we color them white lies. It's a white lie. It's a minor lie.
Well, and gosh, if that's not a racial comment.
Yeah. Black is bad and white is good. So
I never thought about that till just.
Yeah. And so,
man.
and that's, and we haven't even gotten to what.
Oh no, we haven't even gotten to the main event. This is all preamble.
This is all preamble stuff. But yet, when it comes to how God views Abraham,
and this goes for David too, and the whole Bathsheba thing.
I would agree. King David. Yeah.
Like there's some parallels here.
Yeah.
For sure.
There's this element of they are remembered as I'm thinking of, is it Hebrews 13, the great cloud of witnesses?
It's either 12 or 13.
Okay,
I can't remember.
So in Hebrews, it talks about this great cloud of witness, and there's this redemption that I personally believe is because of Jesus and his dying on the cross, and how God views us and humanity of, God is not this cosmic killjoy that has got a list of the good things that we've done and the bad things that we've done. And we all hope that when it's all said and done, our list of good things outweighs our list of bad things, because it's not. It's about faith. It's about grace. And I just think God views us. And again, I think this is one of those things that you understand better if you have the privilege of becoming a parent of a child, in that you focus on the good things, you focus on the positives of who this person is, and not so much the negatives. And when the negatives come into play, it's not it doesn't change your heart towards that person. It's just, I don't want those things to be in your life. I just don't want you to be that person. I want you to be good. And a healthy parent looks at their child and remembers all the good and all the pleasant, and the bad stuff is just, it just really doesn't even matter. And so, yeah, we'll pick up with verse 16, I think, next time, and talk about that stuff, and maybe even dig a little bit deeper into some of the things that Abraham did. Because one of the things I do think that stands out to me in the parallel of being a parent is how he responded to God and chose God over his own offspring, regardless of any kind of long-standing promise. I just can't imagine being a parent of a child and choosing God in the way that he did over his child. But
no, that's a really good point. I had kind of forgotten about that. I was so focused on Hagar that I had forgotten about. Oh boy. Yep. Next time is going to be good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging around for this epic episode.
Yes.
We cracked the hour mark, guys and ladies. We did it. High fives all around. Thanks for listening. Just again, real quick, if you want to get in touch with us, Dave's at David J. Hogue on Twitter. I'm at Cam Brennan. Emails hello@SuperMegaCorp. Those links are all in the show notes, as well as links to the stuff that we talked about. And also a shout out to our Patreon supporters, Katie, Wilby, and Rachel. You guys continue to support us, and we think that's super cool. And hey, if you listen to the show, we also think that's very cool.
Yes, thank you.
There's, like I said, links to all that stuff in the show notes. If you're listening on your phone, you swipe up, left, right. It's not Tinder. Don't worry. You're not going to automatically match with us. Just swipe around your phone and find the show notes. Click on the good links. Check it all out. And, shoot us a line, say hey, and we'll be back in the future.
Yeah. We'll see you then.
Bye.